There is a moment in every person's life when they finally realize that peace is more valuable than attention, dignity is more valuable than approval, and silence is more powerful than any argument. If you're watching this video right now, you may be at that exact point, the point where you are tired of chasing people, tired of explaining yourself to those who already decided not to understand you, and tired of begging for respect that should have been freely given. This message is not ordinary motivation. It is a deep, mature reminder drawn from the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, and even Einstein, who all understood that true strength lives in self-control, not in noise. Listen to the very end of this video, because what you are about to hear has shifted the lives of thousands of people across centuries. If you absorb it fully, it will change how you see yourself, how you respond to disrespect, and how you walk into every room from this day forward. And before we begin, make sure you subscribe to The Inner Fortress. This is where you learn the kind of self-mastery, emotional intelligence, and inner calm that gives you real presence in a chaotic world. 1. There comes a time when chasing people feels like dragging your soul behind you, and the truth is simple. Anyone you have to chase is already walking away. Marcus Aurelius warned that the closer a person is to their nature, the less they beg for what is not theirs. When you chase people, you abandon your nature. You enter a battlefield where dignity is traded for crumbs of attention. In real life, you see this everywhere. A woman trying to convince a partner who already checked out emotionally, a man texting someone who replies only when they are bored, or a friend apologizing to people who never value them. Stoicism teaches that your energy is too precious to be thrown at closed doors. Epictetus said that your peace is your responsibility, which means you must protect it from situations that constantly demand your dignity as payment. When you stop chasing, something surprising happens. The right people start respecting you, and the wrong people slowly fade away. It is not rejection, it is redirection. Your silence begins to speak for you, and it says, "I know my worth." Begging has destroyed more self-respect than failure ever has. Seneca wrote that what is required for a good life is not to lower yourself, but to elevate your spirit above the noise. Begging for love, attention, forgiveness, or explanation is a quiet confession that you do not see your own value. Real life proves this. When you beg someone to treat you better, they often treat you worse. When you beg for clarity from someone who thrives on confusing you, they feed on your anxiety. When you beg for closure, you hand them the power to decide your peace. Einstein once said that unnecessary explanations reveal insecurity, and unnecessary begging reveals emotional poverty. The moment you stop begging, people start seeing you differently. They may not say it, but they feel it. Your energy becomes rarer. You stop being someone who is available for disrespect, and you transform into someone who protects their soul the way a king protects his crown. Silence becomes your boundary. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. It is the space where you regain clarity, rebuild strength, and rise above emotional chaos. When Einstein spoke about the power of solitude, he was describing the essence of silence. A mind that is not distracted creates solutions faster, heals deeper, and thinks more creatively. Stoics understood this long before modern psychology confirmed it. When you stop chasing, you regain your direction. When you stop begging, you regain your dignity. When you stop explaining, you regain your power. Your silence becomes your presence. Your silence becomes your self-respect. Your silence becomes your superpower. And if this message is speaking to you right now, stay with me until the end of this video. What you're about to learn will reshape your emotional life. And remember, subscribe to The Inner Fortress for more Stoic wisdom that strengthens your mind and builds the kind of calm, confidence the world notices without you ever saying a word. 2. There is a stage in life where silence isn't just a reaction, it is a transformation. This stage usually appears after heartbreak, betrayal, disappointment, or when life forces you to confront who truly values you. Many people think silence is emptiness, but silence is where your rebirth happens. When someone hurts you and expects you to argue and you choose not to, that silence unsettles them more than any words could. When someone lies about you and expects you to defend yourself and you choose peace, your silence exposes the truth more effectively than explanations ever could. Marcus Aurelius said that the soul becomes stronger in stillness than in noise. Real life proves it. The moment you stop reacting, people reveal who they really are. The friend who only stayed because you were useful disappears. The partner who fed off your emotional reactions becomes confused. The family member who manipulated you starts losing control. And in that space, that quiet, powerful space, You begin to see your worth without distortion. Silence is not withdrawal, it is elevation. Silence also brings you face to face with yourself, and this is where your greatest transformation begins. People fear silence because it reveals the truth they avoid, the reality of their choices, their patterns, their wounds, their mistakes, and their healing. Epictetus taught that the person who masters their inner world controls their outer world, and silence is where that mastery begins. When life forces you to be quiet, you start hearing your deeper voice, the one that tells you what you deserve, what you need to release, and what you must evolve into. Real-life examples are everywhere. The man who finally realizes he was dimming his light for people who never appreciated him. The woman who discovers her strength after being abandoned by the person she loved the most. The friend who realizes they were always the emotional backbone while others brought only chaos. In that clear mental space, you begin rebuilding your boundaries, your peace, your direction, and your standards. It is in silence that you redefine your identity. You stop begging, stop explaining, stop tolerating confusion, and start choosing peace like it's oxygen. Because it is. Your silence becomes a message that travels further than any explanation ever could. It tells the world you are no longer interested in performing for approval. You are no longer battling for relevance in the lives of people who never saw your value. You are not fighting for relationships that cannot survive honesty. You are not explaining your heart to people committed to misunderstanding it. Marcus Aurelius said to live as if the world is always watching your character, not your voice, and silence reveals your character more strongly than any argument. Real life shows us that your silence shifts the entire dynamic. The person who thought they had control begins to doubt themselves. The people who disrespected you start reevaluating their behavior. And you, the one who used to overthink, overgive, overexplain, begin to feel a new kind of strength rising inside, a strength that doesn't need permission, a strength that doesn't need attention, a strength that doesn't need validation. Your silence becomes your crown, and the world responds differently to someone who carries themselves with quiet certainty. Stay with this message until the end. What you are becoming in this silence is far greater than what you lost. 3. There is a certain kind of silence that happens when life has hurt you enough times that noise no longer impresses you. It is the silence that comes after betrayal, after humiliation, after giving your best to people who gave nothing back. At first, this silence feels heavy, almost like loneliness. But slowly, it becomes clarity, it becomes strength, it becomes wisdom. Marcus Aurelius said that when the mind refuses to be disturbed by what it cannot control, peace enters like sunlight. Real life shows this clearly. The person who once argued in every conflict suddenly learns to walk away. The person who used to run after explanations begins to accept that not everyone deserves access to their truth. Silence becomes the healing space where you finally understand who you are without the noise of other people's opinions. And that understanding changes everything. Silence also becomes the moment you finally see your past differently. Many people think they need closure from others, but closure usually comes from silence. The silence you choose when you no longer want to revisit old wounds. Seneca said that no person can be harmed unless they allow the wound to reopen in their mind. When you stop explaining why someone hurt you, the pain slowly loses its power. Think of the person who apologized over and over to someone who never changed. Think of the friend who gave endless loyalty to people who betrayed them repeatedly. Think of the individual who kept defending their kindness to those who twisted it into weakness. Silence is the moment you say, "Enough, I owe myself peace." And from that moment, your past stops controlling your present. Your silence also becomes the space where your self-worth reforms. We live in a world where people respond faster to drama than to kindness. The loudest person is often mistaken for the strongest, but Stoicism teaches the opposite. Real strength is quiet, it is composed, it is calculated. Einstein himself said he often needed silence to think clearly because the mind becomes its most powerful when freed from unnecessary noise. In your quiet moments, you begin to realize you don't need to convince anyone of your value. You don't need to fight to be seen. You don't need to beg someone to choose you. You become grounded in the truth that your worth is not negotiable. And when that truth settles in your spirit, you stop fearing loss. You start fearing self-betrayal. There is a moment when silence becomes a mirror. You start noticing your own patterns, the emotional habits that kept you stuck. Maybe you stayed too long in situations that drained you. Maybe you ignored red flags because you cared too deeply. Maybe you explained yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. Silence brings all of this to the surface, not to shame you, but to free you. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the greatest victories are won within the mind long before the world notices. In silence, you win those battles. You rise above the version of yourself that tolerated what you never deserved. You develop the emotional maturity to walk away without bitterness, stay silent without fear, and rebuild yourself without needing applause. And finally, silence becomes your new authority. People start noticing something different about you. You move with calmness instead of urgency. You react with wisdom instead of impulse. You speak with intention instead of emotion. Your presence becomes heavier, more grounded, more respected. Seneca said that the quiet person often holds more power in a room than the loudest voice. This is why silence becomes your superpower. It shifts the balance. You stop being someone others can easily provoke. You stop being predictable. You stop being controlled. Instead, you become the person who speaks only when necessary, acts only with purpose, and moves only when it is wise. Your silence becomes the language of your evolution, and the world learns to listen. 4. There comes a point when silence becomes your way of reclaiming control over your emotional life. People often expect reactions because reactions give them power. Power to manipulate, power to control, power to unsettle your mind. But when you remain calm, when your silence is steady, when your presence does not break, something profound happens. The dynamic changes. Marcus Aurelius said that the person who is unmoved cannot be defeated from the outside. Real life confirms this. The moment you stop responding to disrespect, the moment you stop feeding conflict, the moment you stop justifying your actions, you take back the authority you once gave away unintentionally. Silence is how you rise above the chaos that once consumed you. Silence also teaches you emotional discipline. In a world that encourages you to speak quickly, react instantly, and express every feeling without thinking, silence becomes a rare skill. Seneca warned that emotions spoken too quickly often betray the truth inside you. Real people lose relationships, opportunities, and peace because they speak before understanding. But in silence, you pause, you think, you analyze, you observe, you learn, you begin responding from wisdom instead of impulse. Consider the person who once reacted to every insult, every message, every provocation. Now observe them when they choose silence instead. Their peace becomes untouchable. The same people who tried, trigger them, become powerless. Their calmness becomes their shield, and their silence becomes their strategy. Silence also reminds you that not every battle deserves your presence. There are arguments designed to drain you. There are conversations designed to confuse you. There are people who speak only to hear themselves, not to understand you. Epictetus warned that engaging with fools lowers your spirit and wastes your time. In real life, this is obvious. When you stop arguing with people who do not listen, you conserve your energy for real battles. When you stop explaining yourself to people who twist your words, you protect your truth. When you stop trying to change people who have no intention of growing, you protect your peace. Silence is not surrender. It is strategic withdrawal from battles that are beneath your purpose. Your silence also forces others to confront themselves. People who mistreated you expect you to chase. They expect you to beg. They expect you to fight for what they never protected. But when you go silent, they face the reality they avoided, that they were the problem. The friend who used you begins to feel the emptiness of losing your loyalty. The partner who took you for granted begins to feel the weight of their choices. The critic who mocked you begins to realize you were never weak. You were patient. Silence exposes truth in a way arguments never will. Marcus Aurelius said that the wise person corrects others through their example, not through their noise. Your silence becomes that example. And in the end, your silence becomes your rebirth. You begin living from a place of self-respect, not desperation. You begin choosing peace over attention. You begin valuing your energy like gold. You begin filtering relationships by effort, honesty, and consistency, not excuses. Seneca wrote that the calm mind is the ultimate fortress, and that is what you are building through your silence. A fortress that cannot be shaken, a fortress that cannot be manipulated, a fortress that cannot be broken. Silence is not the absence of strength, it is the maturity of strength. It transforms you into someone who moves with purpose, speaks with intention, and rises with dignity. And when you reach this level, your silence no longer hides your power, it reveals. 5. There's a stage in your evolution where silence becomes the proof that you no longer fear being misunderstood. You stop trying to force people to see your heart. You stop trying to convince people of your intentions. You stop trying to justify your actions. Instead, you let your consistency speak for you. Marcus Aurelius said that the world judges loudly, but truth reveals itself quietly. Real life proves this. Someone can create a narrative about you, exaggerate your flaws or twist your decisions, but none of it lasts. Time exposes lies. Time reveals character. Time brings truth to the surface. When you step back and stay silent, life itself becomes your witness. The people who once doubted you will eventually say, I see now. And those who never believed in you were never meant to stay. Silence cleans your path without you lifting a finger. Silence also frees you from emotional slavery. Many people live trapped inside the opinions of others, constantly defending, constantly explaining, constantly proving. Seneca wrote that a person who seeks approval becomes a captive to every passing judgment. In real life, this looks like the hardworking man who explains every step because people assume he is failing. It looks like the loyal friend who apologizes for boundaries. It looks like the woman defending her worth to people who never intended to value her. But when you stop explaining, something shifts inside you. You begin to live for alignment, not applause. You begin to choose what is right, not what is popular. You begin to trust your judgment instead of outsourcing your confidence. Silence becomes your declaration that you no longer belong to the opinions of others. Silence finally teaches you that peace is not something you search for, it's something you protect. Einstein believed that the human mind reaches genius when it is calm enough to see connections others miss. Your silence nurtures that calm. You begin thinking smarter, choosing better, and moving with intention. You learn to walk away without hostility, love without attachment, connect without losing yourself, and forgive without reopening old doors. You begin to understand that you don't have to respond to be respected. You don't have to argue to be right, and you don't have to chase to be chosen. Silence becomes your discipline. Silence becomes your distinction. Silence becomes your doorway into a stronger version of yourself, a version that refuses to apologize for growing. 6. There comes a moment when you realize that silence is not just the absence of words, it is the presence of power. This realization usually comes after life has tested you, broken you, or stretched you beyond what you thought you could handle. In those moments, speaking feels exhausting, explaining feels empty, and chasing feels humiliating. Marcus Aurelius said that the mind gains strength when it withdraws from what drains it. Silence is that withdrawal. In real life, think of the person who reached their breaking point and suddenly stopped arguing with a partner who never listened. Think of the employee who stopped defending themselves to a boss who never appreciated their work. Think of the person who stopped chasing friendships built on convenience. Their silence wasn't weakness. It was the moment they reclaimed their soul. Silence is how you rise. Silence teaches you loyalty to yourself. For years, you may have been loyal to people at the expense of your own well-being. You may have shown up for people who never showed up for you. You may have explained yourself to people who've twisted your intentions. Seneca said that a wise person saves their energy for what builds them, not what breaks them. When you choose silence, you choose yourself. You choose your sanity over someone else's ego. You choose peace over chaos. You choose clarity over emotional noise. And as you sit in silence, you begin to feel a shift, a strength forming where your wounds once lived. Real life shows this transformation clearly. The moment you stop giving your energy to the wrong people, the right opportunities begin to appear. Silence opens doors that noise kept closed. And finally, silence positions you above the chaos that once controlled you. Einstein believed that the greatest intelligence is the ability to remain calm in situations that make others panic. Your silence becomes this intelligence. It makes you unpredictable to those who once manipulated your reactions. It makes you strong in rooms where others crumble. It makes you graceful in situations where others would explode. You become the person who does not need to raise their voice to be heard, who does not need to beg to be valued, who does not need to explain to be understood. Silence becomes your reputation. It becomes your energy. It becomes your authority. And through that authority, you rise into the version of yourself you were always meant to be, powerful, grounded, and unshakable. 7. There is a turning point in life where your silence stops being a reaction and becomes a declaration that you have grown certain battles, certain people, and certain versions of yourself. At this stage, you are no longer triggered by what once controlled you. You stop giving energy to things that drain you. You stop participating in arguments meant to destabilize you. Marcus Aurelius said that nothing strengthens the spirit like the ability to remain unmoved by external noise. Real life shows this clearly. The moment you become silent, the conversations you once tolerated become unbearable. The drama you once entertained becomes boring. The people you once defended become irrelevant. Your silence announces your evolution more loudly than words ever could. It is the sound of your soul saying, I know who I am now. Silence becomes the moment you reclaim emotional independence, something most people never achieve in their lifetime. Emotional independence means your peace no longer depends on someone's validation, apology, or approval. Seneca wrote that the person who requires nothing from others becomes truly powerful. When you become silent, you stop needing explanations from people who never had the maturity to give them. You stop searching for closure from those who caused the wound. You stop trying to justify why you deserve respect. Real life confirms this. Think of the man who finally walked away without giving a long speech. Think of the woman who realized she didn't owe anyone a conversation about her healing. Think of the individual who stayed silent and let time reveal everything. Silence breaks emotional dependence and replaces it with emotional sovereignty. Your silence also exposes the intentions of others faster than conversations ever could. People often hide behind words, but they cannot hide behind your silence. Epictetus taught that stillness reveals the motives of those around you because they can no longer manipulate your reactions. In real life, when you go silent, the people who only wanted to take from you disappear quickly. The ones who needed your attention to feel powerful grow uncomfortable. The ones who use your kindness begin to panic. Silence removes the stage on which manipulators perform. And those who genuinely value you, they stay. They approach you with sincerity, not guilt. They come with solutions, not excuses. Silence becomes the sorting mechanism that separates truth from illusion. Silence forces people to confront themselves. Many people project their insecurities onto you, blame you for their mistakes, or twist situations to avoid accountability. But when you become silent, you remove yourself as their target. Suddenly, they have no one left to blame. This creates an uncomfortable mirror they are forced to face. Einstein said that growth comes when a person is left alone with their thoughts long enough to question their own patterns. Silence gives others that opportunity, and whether they grow or crumble is not your concern. Real life shows this repeatedly. The friend who wronged you begins to feel guilt they once ignored. The ex who mistreated you realizes your absence was the consequence of their own choices. Your silence becomes the teacher they never expected. And finally, your silence becomes your legacy. People remember the person who stayed calm when provoked. They remember the person who didn't collapse under pressure. They remember the person who maintained dignity when others lost theirs. Seneca wrote that the calm soul becomes unforgettable. Your silence shifts how people speak about you, how they see you, and how they approach you. It becomes a symbol of your maturity, your evolution, and your emotional mastery. Your silence says, I do not need to shout to be powerful. I do not need to argue to be right. I do not need to explain to be understood. And that is the moment you become unstoppable. 8. There is a depth to silence that only people who have suffered deeply understand. Silence becomes your refuge after you've been betrayed, misunderstood, used, or underestimated. It becomes the place where you learn the truth about yourself, that you were strong long before anyone noticed, and patient long before anyone appreciated it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes victorious when it withdraws from anything beneath its dignity. Real life mirrors this truth. Silence appears not when you are weak, but when you finally realize you deserve better. It is the sanctuary where your wounds begin turning into wisdom, where your disappointments turn into direction, and where your heartbreak becomes rebirth. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is renewal. Silence becomes a space where you break the cycle of overgiving. Many people lose themselves because they spend years pouring into others who pour nothing back. They apologize first, explain the most, forgive too quickly, and accept too much. Seneca warned that excessive kindness without boundaries becomes self-destruction. When you choose silence, you stop being available for emotional chaos. You stop showing up for people who thrive on your presence but vanish when you need support. You stop carrying relationships on your back. Silence is the shift from I hope they treat me better to I will never let them treat me like that again. Real life confirms this. The day you become silent, people finally feel the weight of your absence, something they never respected in your presence. Silence develops your emotional intelligence in ways nothing else can. In silence, you learn to observe instead of react. You learn to read between actions instead of believing every word. You begin to understand that people reveal themselves not by what they say, but by what they repeatedly do. Einstein said that the greatest minds listen before they speak, and silence trains you to do exactly that. In real life, silence gives you X-ray vision. You notice the small things, the tone of someone's voice, the pattern of their excuses, the truth behind their inconsistencies. You begin to trust your intuition more than someone's explanation. Silence turns your emotional sensitivity into a powerful form of intelligence. Silence also becomes your gateway to self-respect. When you stop explaining yourself, you start valuing yourself. When you stop begging for clarity, you start demanding honesty. When you stop accepting emotional crumbs, you start expecting reciprocity. Marcus Aurelius said that dignity is the greatest armor a person can wear, and silence is how you put that armor on. Real life shows this transformation beautifully. The woman who once tolerated manipulation now refuses to answer messages that insult her peace. The man who once chased validation now chooses solitude over shallow connections. The friend who once ignored red flags now cuts off anyone who threatens their emotional stability. Silence becomes the language of your renewed self-respect. And in the end, silence becomes your evolution. You no longer need to defend who you are. You no longer need to prove what you feel. You no longer need to justify your boundaries. Your silence says everything: that you have grown, that you have healed, that you have awakened. Seneca wrote that the one who controls themselves becomes greater than the one who controls nations. Your silence proves you now control yourself. It proves you are no longer reactive, no longer easily manipulated, no longer emotionally dependent. Your silence becomes your crown, your shield, your transformation. And the world responds to this new version, you, with the respect they never gave the old you. Before this message ends, take a moment to breathe and understand something deeply. You did not find this video by accident. You found it because you are entering a new season of your life, a season where silence becomes your strength, where peace becomes your priority, where dignity becomes your boundary, and where self-respect becomes your identity. You have listened through the truths of Marcus Aurelius, the depth of Seneca, the discipline of Epictetus, and the clarity of Einstein, and now you stand at the doorway of a new version of yourself. A version that does not chase, does not beg, does not over-explain. A version that moves with quiet confidence and inner power. And before you leave, I want to ask you for one favor, a simple but meaningful one. If this message spoke to you in any way, if it gave you clarity, if it made you stronger, if it helped you heal, if it reminded you of your worth, then subscribe to the Inner Fortress. Not for the algorithm, not for numbers, but because every message here is crafted to make you wiser, calmer, more grounded, more unshakable in a world full of noise. Subscribing means you are choosing growth. Subscribing means you are choosing evolution. Subscribing means you are choosing the version of yourself that is rising right now. So do me that favor. Tap the subscribe button, join this growing community, and allow Stoic wisdom to guide your journey. Thank you for listening to The End. The true transformation begins from here.